The Athenians lowered their left shoulders, aimed their spear, and slammed into the Persian front line. This was the Battle of Marathon, where tiny Athens defeated the great Persian Empire and saved Western civilization, or so the story goes. The Greco-Persian Wars are some of the most defining moments of Western history. But how did we get here? If we want to understand these heights, we need to start with the depths. With the Bronze Age collapse, the Mycenaean world came to an end. The great palaces were aflame, and populations plummeted, falling by half within 150 years. With this breakdown, society devolved into simple subsistence. The linear B writing of the Mycenaeans falls out of the historical and archaeological record. The period from the Bronze Age collapse to around 800 BC is called the Greek Dark Age, due to the absence of historical sources. The term Dark Age has fallen out of favor recently, but for the majority of the Greeks, or Proto-Greeks, life in the Dark Age was likely harsher than their grandparents had faced. There was a good chance their ancestral village was now either abandoned or half empty. Higher level political control had fallen apart. In its place, the building block of society became the oikos, the household, a family unit that operated similar to that of many tribal societies. With a lack of source material, little can definitively be said about events during this period. A few things are clear, though, either from the archaeological record or from later myth. The use and production of iron in place of bronze became increasingly common. Near the beginning of the Dark Age, probably around the year 1100, the Dorian invasion occurred. These Dorians were a group of Greeks who spoke their own dialect and were generally more primitive than their Mycenaean neighbors. During the power vacuum brought by the destruction of the Mycenaean palace centers, the Dorians invaded from northern Greece. They swept south, destroying and wiping aside whatever remnants of the old society remained. They chiefly settled in the Peloponnese, but also expanded onto several islands and took control over Crete. The Mycenaeans had made the first forays into Anatolia, but during the Greek Dark Ages, it appears large numbers moved to the near coast. The exact order of events isn't known, but when the lights come back on, we see centuries-old Greek settlements up and down the whole coast of Anatolia. While we talk about the Greeks of the Archaic and Classical Age, it's important to remember that while they shared a language and could be considered a distinct people, they were far from united. They were split into several tribes and further into hundreds of city-states. According to their mythology, all of the Greeks descend from Hellen, who was the grandson of Pandora and of the Titan Prometheus, who brought the gift of fire to humanity. Even today, the Greeks call themselves the Hellenes, and their country Hellas. Hellen had 3 sons, Doris, Xuthos, and Aeolus. The children of Doris became the Dorians, and the children of Aeolus became the Aeolians. Xuthus had 2 children, Ion and Achaeus. The children of each became the Ionians and the Achaeans. These Achaeans were the original inhabitants of the south of Greece, and probably direct descendants of the Mycenaeans in the Peloponnese. In Homer's works, the term Achaean seems to apply to the Greeks as a whole. The Dorians, as we mentioned, invaded during the beginning of the Greek Dark Age, and either subjugated or integrated with the Achaeans they conquered in the Peloponnese. The Ionians originated in the area around Euboea and the Attic Peninsula. Early on, they colonized the Aegean Islands and the opposite coast of the Aegean. And last, the Aeolians were from north-central Greece, around Boeotia and Thessaly, and spoke a dialect which retained some ancient features of Mycenaean. They also had colonies on the coast of Anatolia, generally north of the scattering of Ionian cities. As we reach the end of the Dark Ages, the historical picture becomes more clear. The Greek world was beginning to recover culturally and in population. The 8th century is generally considered the date of the transition from Dark Age to Archaic period, with the first Olympics held in 776 BC. The 8th and 7th centuries BC were the heyday of Greek colonization. These colonies were official expeditions of colonists sent by a specific polis or city-state. Each colony abroad was loyal to its mother city first and its tribe second. These colonies were scattered across the Mediterranean and Black Seas. Colonies could be found in southern Spain, southern France, Libya, the south coast of Anatolia, at the meeting point of Europe and Asia, along the western coast of the Black Sea, and even on the Crimea. But one area of the Mediterranean attracted the most Greek attention: Sicily and southern Italy. The very first colonies were sent by Chalkis to Sicily. Likewise, the Greek presence in the boot of Italy was so substantial, the area was long called Magna Graecia. Even today, a small minority of the population of southern Italy speaks a dialect of Greek. During the Archaic period in Greece, society began to recover. The oikos made way to the polis. The city-states you are familiar with were born during this period. Athens, Sparta, Corinth, and Thebes all consolidated into single units during the 8th and 7th centuries. Outside the Greek world, to the east of the Ionian cities, lay the kingdom of Lydia. This kingdom filled the void left behind by the fall of the Hittites in the Bronze Age collapse. During the late 600s and early 500s BC, the Lydian kingdom expanded toward the east and came into conflict with the powers of Mesopotamia. In the 590s, war broke out between the Lydians and the Medes. The war ended in 585 BC when a solar eclipse took place during a battle, and both sides decided to call it quits. With eastward expansion sealed off for the moment, Lydia expanded to the west. The Lydian king Croesus finalized the work of his father and conquered the whole Anatolian coast of the Aegean, bringing the Greek cities of Ionia and Caria fully under Lydian rule. These were the heights of the Lydian kingdom, but its downfall would be swift, and it would be personal. King Croesus' brother-in-law, Astyages, was the king of the Medes. In 550 BC, a man named Cyrus rebelled against the Median Empire and overthrew Astyages, his own grandfather. As the ally and family of the Medes and their king, Croesus and the Lydians retaliated by capturing a Persian-controlled city near their shared border. The Persians struck back. Cyrus led out the army and fought the Lydians to a stalemate. With winter approaching, Croesus and the Lydians retreated to protect their capital. The Lydians were taken off guard when Cyrus's army was discovered still advancing toward Sardis. Croesus gathered a large army and lined up to meet the advancing Persians. In the Battle of Thymbra, the Persians were outnumbered 2-1. Short on numbers, they proved themselves superior in tactics, with their cavalry sweeping the Lydian cavalry off the field and then turning and flanking the Lydian infantry. The Persians were victorious. Croesus escaped, though, and fled back to Sardis, where he was confident he could withstand a siege until his Egyptian or Babylonian allies came to his aid. Many sieges took years, but Cyrus and his army found a weak spot on the walls and captured the city after only 14 days. Like the Median Empire and soon the Babylonian Empire, the Lydian Empire was no more. The Persians incorporated the territories of Lydia into a satrapy, a semi-autonomous province of their empire. With the Persian Empire bordering the Aegean Sea, the stage was now set for the great Greco-Persian Wars. 40 years after their conquest by Persia, the cities of Ionia were chafing under their new masters. The Ionians had not given up their independent spirit and were constantly subverting the purposes of their rulers. In response, the Persians appointed tyrants to rule each of their cities. But this harsher and more direct rule only pushed the Ionians closer to revolt. In 499 BC, the tyrant of the city of Miletus, sensing his impending dismissal for a failed invasion of the island of Naxos, rallied the cities of Ionia, Caria, and Iolia, and rebelled against the Persians. At first, the rebels had all the momentum. With aid from Athens and the city of Eretria, they captured and destroyed the city of Sardis. But this was their high water mark. These Greek rebels were caught and defeated by the Persians at Ephesus. The war continued for 6 years until the Persians finally recaptured the center of the rebellion, Miletus. The remaining Greek cities of Anatolia surrendered. The Persian king Darius was merciful to his subjects. The intervention of the Athenians and Eretrians, however, would not be forgiven. Darius saw how the meddling Greek cities could disrupt his empire, and he resolved to conquer Greece. In 492, an invasion force crossed from Anatolia over the Bosporus into Thrace. This wasn't the first time a Persian army had passed this way. 21 years earlier, Darius had went to war with the Scythians and marched to the north of the Black Sea. On his return, he conquered Thrace and received Macedonia's submission as a vassal. In 492, the Persians reasserted control over Thrace and integrated Macedonia before heading back to Anatolia. But ambassadors were sent to the city-states of Greece, asking for token demonstrations of submission, an offering of earth and water. Fearing mighty Persia, most submitted. The Athenians and the Spartans refused, though. For Athens, its quarrel with Persia went back to before even the Ionian Revolt. The last tyrant of Athens, Hippias, after being deposed, had fled and received refuge in Persia. Not only did Athens and Sparta refuse to give the offering, they both executed the Persian ambassadors sent to them, intentionally provoking Darius. The Persian king, infuriated by this insult, prepared a new invasion force. His fleet left from Cilicia and sailed into the Aegean. They captured and burned the city of Naxos and moved on to Eretria. The city was besieged, sacked, and looted, and its citizens enslaved, an example to all others of what resistance to Persia would bring. From Euboea, the fleet sailed south to Marathon on the Attic Peninsula, a day's march from Athens. The exiled old Athenian tyrant Hippias accompanied the invasion and suggested the location as an ideal place to unload the large army and get it in fighting order before advancing on Athens. The wide plain of Marathon would also give the Persian cavalry plenty of room to maneuver if a battle occurred. Word had reached Athens of the invasion and destruction of Eretria and the Persians' proximity to their city. A runner was sent to Sparta to call for their aid. In the meantime, 9,000 Athenians marched out the 25 miles to Marathon, where they were met by 1,000 more hoplites from the small city of Plataea. The Greek allies made their camp atop a low hill above the plain. Below them, they could see the Persians unloading their large army, probably 3 times as numerous as the Greek force. Several days passed in a stalemate, with neither side keen on attacking the position of the other. The Athenians were protected by forest or sharpened pikes on either side of their line, which would render the Persian cavalry unable to maneuver effectively. On the other hand, the Greeks could not advance on the Persian camp without making themselves vulnerable to the Persian cavalry. Each day passed without real change. This delay worked in the Athenians' favor. They were still expecting the elite Spartan contingent to join them soon. The Spartans had been delayed because of their festival of Carneia, which forbade them from fighting. Once the festival had ended, though, the Spartans would be on their way. The two sides stood about a mile apart, waiting for some condition to change. Then, on the 5th day, the Persian cavalry was nowhere in sight. Where they went isn't clear, but it's thought they may have been reboarding the ships, about to sail around and attack Athens while its army was away. Whatever the reason for the absence, this was the moment the Athenians had been waiting for. Their general was Miltiades, who had been given command of the army because of his experience serving with and then fighting against the Persians in the past. Miltiades ordered the Greek line to spread out to match the length of the Persian lines. Instead of making it the same depth for the whole length, he had the center form up 4 men deep, while the wings were 8 men deep. Miltiades gave the signal, and the Athenian army marched forward just to the edge of the range of the Persian archers. And then Herodotus says they ran the last 400 meters and crashed into the Persian lines. As expected, the thin Greek center began to be pushed backward, but the deeper wings held their ground. Before long, the strong Greek wings gained the upper hand, and the Persian wings broke and began to flee back to their boats. The Greek wings then turned and attacked the Persian center from behind, throwing it into complete chaos and causing them to break and flee as well. The battle was becoming a rout. Some of the Persians did make it back to the ships, but fighting continued on the shore, with the Athenians capturing several of the boats. The Persian commander, Datis, survived, and the remaining Persian ships pushed off from shore. Left behind on the battlefield were the bodies of at least 6,400 Persians, compared to only 192 Athenians and 11 Plataeans. A great victory for the Greeks. Although the battle was won, they were not free from danger yet. The remnants of the Persian fleet began to sail south, around the tip of Attica at Sunion, towards Athens. The Athenians immediately began an exhausted march back to the city. They arrived just in time to prevent the Persians from landing. Datis, seeing his chances dashed, turned his fleet and sailed back toward Persian territory. Hippias, who after years of exile had finally set foot back in Attica for a few short days, died at sea. The Persian threat had been repulsed, for now. Darius quickly began gathering an even larger invasion force to end the Greeks for good. Next time, the disunited Greeks will have to stand together or face extermination at the hands of a new, colossal Persian invasion. Subscribe so you don't miss it.